Hey, Danny. Good to go.
Okay, it's 7:01 and we'll start our meeting. First, we'll have a roll call, which Jerry takes care of us with his who's online. I don't believe we have anyone else on the phone or anyone that I can't see. So first of all, we have our approval of our minutes from November 5th, which was our public meeting. Those of you who read it, I guess I need a motion on, excuse me.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Thank you, Bruce.
Second.
Thank you. Do we have any discussion? If no discussion, then we'll take a vote. All in favor of approving the minutes from the November 5th meeting? Aye.
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 Any nays? Any abstentions? Oh, good. Okay. Perfect.
And Frank, if we could just find out, we did have somebody join us by phone. Who is at 860-440-7291?
It's Tara.
Hey, Tara. Thanks for coming tonight.
Thank you.
I don't believe we have any new business. Old business, number one is our discussion of presenting the findings of the task force. So as Jerry just kind of talked to us about, I believe we are on the town council's agenda in January. I believe it's the 12th. So that is kind of like where we're heading to now. I think both of our agenda items with the presentation of our findings, and then also a discussion of our implementation of our plans kind of coincide with one another. I think the idea is we have to go forward in how we're going to represent ourselves and how we're going to put this together. I know that Chad has put together a presentation that we've talked together with the public and also with the stakeholders earlier. We had discussed earlier about maybe getting some more information as part of that. I don't know if any of that has happened at this point, but I would open that to both Chad and Jerry, who are both kind of working that more detail, if you would. So please go ahead. Either one of you is perfect.
So, yeah, I think what needs to happen at this point is for us to present our findings. So, to the council. So I think we had the meeting with the stakeholders, and then we followed that up with the meeting from a public meeting, and there was we got a few other comments, and I guess the question that we have to answer is how, if anything, what if anything do we change on the recommendation sheet that we had created? So are there any amendments to that? And if so, we kind of need to finalize what our recommendation is going to be. I think, it would be great if we could get through that tonight. What exactly are we recommending? Because that's what we will be presenting to the council. So, and if we don't settle that tonight, then we have to meet again before January 12th, and we have to kind of, we've got a hard stop now. So I don't know if that makes sense to everybody, and and I can share screen or something like that if that helps, or to look at our where we stood as we were doing the public meeting, if that's helpful, or so I'm
Well, Jerry, to follow that up, I mean, did anybody, when we presented it to the user groups, I don't really recall anybody having a problem with it or wanting more or wanting less. Trying
Yeah,
to, I mean, everybody seemed to be very supportive of it. So
right.
that was my take. So anybody else have a different take and think that we should change something, I think now would be a good time to vet that.
I guess the one thing that I think that we did here at the stakeholder group was renovations to the baseball playing surface was one thing that did come up. And you know, I guess in the public meeting, we kind of presented that as one of the you know, things that we probably would recommend. I don't think we formally kind of decided on that, but I think there was general consensus that yeah, if we're going to be fixing everything and the baseball field needs work, we need to do that as well.
Yeah, I would agree. I did not understand that when the renovations happened a couple of years ago, whatever the time frame was, that the field itself was not really taken care of. The amenities are, you know, what amenities are there are very good, but I did not know that the field itself was kind of in disarray. So I would totally agree that that needs to be part of the process for sure.
And the only other thing I think that we heard at the public meeting was the concern of synthetic turf. I think that was really the only item of note that I heard come up at that meeting. And that was not even really, it was shared by kind of by letter, I guess, is how that kind of came out.
I was going to also say the same, that the conservation folks have spoken not in support of I don't want to speak for them, but my understanding of the interpretation that they're stating is that they are concerned of what type of turf and turf being used and things like that. So I'm not sure if we should have that discussion with them too, if they're available between now and our public presentation, possibly to see exactly, maybe open up the dialogue. I'm not sure what you guys want to do, but I do believe it will probably come back again. So thanks.
So my personal thought on that is, I don't think we'll be able to solve the issue with them now. And I don't think we should. I think it should be a dialogue that probably continues, and ideally either task force or park and rec or high school athletics or the town council or all the above kind of make the decision as to what's the right field. But I think it's something that we probably have to include in our presentation, is that there is some concern and that we know that, and that we'll work through that. And if synthetic is an option, then we need this recommendation. If it's not, then we're going to need more fields and our recommendations would have to go up. And I think that's probably all we meant at the time. And then as we've told them, and I think the response is, if and when the town council wants to proceed forward with whatever construction is going to happen, that's when you really go through the details and you really flush out what type of turf, what type of infill, or if it is synthetic or not at that point. So that would be my recommendation, is that we include it as feedback that we received, and we understand that, but we think we can work through it, you know, through the process.
Would you have to add a caveat if we decided to not have as many turf fields, that would also increase the number of fields, right? I mean, that's the positive of the turf fields.
Yeah, I mean, the turf, the synthetic is, you basically get a third additional field, right? So for every, if you put in, you know, you need 1/3 more fields if you were doing them out of natural grass to get the same use. That's just for true, like actual use. It doesn't count how much time you lose during weather and inclement weather and all that. It's just the rest, right? So that's, you know, you can't plow a grass field and practice on it in March, but you could a synthetic field. So that doesn't even count some of that stuff. But I just think it's something we should be, we have to present it. It was feedback that we got, and we know it's something that has to be resolved as we go forward. But I don't think my personal feelings, I don't think we need to resolve it right now, I guess.
the other concerns, I guess, that there are constraints. And I think when we, plotted out, or, what is the capacity of the property at Fitch High School in terms of fields? I think that synthetic fields, adding the synthetic fields that we were talking about adding, fits the need. If we add natural turf fields up there, there is no more space. So you still have only the 3 rectangles plus a softball field that you can add up there, and everything else has to be off-site. So at that point, we're talking about, sorry about that, my phone is ringing. At that point, then we have to,
Bus.
bust the kids, and we end up with that kind of situation that we're in now. So we don't fully resolve the situation we're in now.
Agreed.
And I don't think we identified any other potential sites for additional fields beyond, the Colchester, Sutton, and the high school.
Right.
I guess the other question is if everybody's okay presenting it that way, that, hey, this was feedback we got. I mean, unless anybody on the committee really feels strongly that we shouldn't even be considering synthetic, personally, I think I'm okay with it. And I've read through the stuff they presented or they submitted. I understand, people have some concerns, but going through Connecticut Department of Health and other agencies that have looked into it, I still feel comfortable that it's an okay recommendation to make. Unless anybody else feels differently, I guess now's, do we want to, I don't think we need to solve it, but now's at least the time to have a high level discussion, as if anybody really has significant problems as a committee, we should talk about it now. Or do we support it going forward?
Well, I guess the support of synthetic fields, I mean, not every synthetic field is created equal, correct? I mean, there's many different types. So I guess, it's like saying purple. Well, there's many different shades of purple. So synthetic fields, I've seen them come in all makes, models, the fill, the stuff, all the different parts to construct synthetic field come in many different parts, many different products. So it'd be interesting to know what maybe educate the public more on what type of product is out there. I mean, I think that would be appropriate, definitely, to talk about or bring some more feedback about, in my opinion. That's just, my own thoughts. Thanks.
So Portia, were you suggesting that we do that before we go to the council? Or like, Chad was saying, that, that discussion kind of happens, if the council decides to move forward in some way to construct the fields, at that point, then you specify what the specific products are.
I think it's important to see that there are some, I think everybody thinks that some of these synthetic fields are the old forms, and there's actually newer forms that are much more environmentally friendly and are filled with more naturally occurring products and things like that now than when they first got really popular 15, 20 years ago. I mean, they've gotten even better, so yeah, I guess it's up to you guys, but I think you're going to have a strong push on the conservation side, and I think it's important to present all sides and just make sure that we're giving as much information about the different products that could be used. But how you want to propel that is up to you guys. I don't want to make the decision. I'm just thinking what people are going to want to hear. So.
Well, I think, sorry, I still say that from what I heard from the conservation people, I think their mindset is that there's not a lot of good solutions out there right now. But I know Chad had said to them that, we haven't determined what products we're going to be using. And that is something that, definitely be looked into once we move forward. So I think it's in the sake of time that we do want to move forward, that I don't think we can present anything to them that will satisfy them at this time.
I
That's
agree
just
with
my
Danny.
thought.
I agree with I think what everybody's saying is that we understand that people may make a objection to the type of fields that it is, but I'm not sure it's the this committee's place to, I mean, I think we can give an opinion, like Chad said, that you've done some research, you've looked, everyone's going to have a different opinion, and that's coming from the conservation folks. And I think it has a long way to go. It's going to go through the council's going to hear it. They're going to figure out what they want to do. It has a lot of traveling still to do. So I don't think we should let that, bog us down or get in the way of
Exactly.
presenting it or, addressing it right now.
I guess what I was saying, that I wasn't saying it should move forward. I was just saying if there was any research that was already done, if Chad had any information on the surfaces, then it would be great to just, whatever we can put in it to start preparing for it. But I'm not saying not to push it forward. That wasn't my intention, or maybe that's not the way that it should have came across.
No, I think I get. I would agree, Portia, that it makes sense to put it out there and I think state fairly succinctly why we still think it's a good option.
Yeah.
That there isn't anything out there that I've ever found that's so horrendous that it should never be considered, right? I mean, Connecticut Department of Health still recommends to every town in Connecticut that they should be built. So that says something to me, especially right now in the middle of the pandemic when we're really trying to listen to health experts. I'm not an expert in health. I'm not an expert in toxicology. So I rely on the people that really are. And when they do their own research and look into it and make the findings, I tend to follow that suit. And so I think we present that. There's a ton of evidence out there, a ton of different studies that we've done, or I shouldn't say that's been done. And we can list a lot of that stuff and just kind of summarize. I would agree that here's why we're still, thinking it's a good option at least.
I think we're saying the same thing, Portia. I think we're on the same page.
All right. I guess looking at maybe even surrounding towns just to see what, I mean, this is stuff we can do after, but just in preparation, these are things that, are ever moving. I mean, I know there might be a long time between now and January, but if there's any information we can gather, looking at like what Ledgers is made out of, that's one of the newer ones that it's coming online, and just kind of seeing what does East Lyme have, what are our neighboring towns using, and kind of just getting down the road. But yeah, definitely something that is that's the one concern I'm hearing the most. That's all. So.
I was just having a thought back to when we talked to the stakeholders about the baseball field. He had spoken about having it all synthetic, so he could play more often and so forth and so on. I don't know how are we as a committee presenting? We know we want to update the baseball field at the high school. What do you feel? Do we feel as a committee is the correct surface of that said baseball field? We had never talked about it before that point, and I don't think maybe none of us understood the what was going on up there to the field itself. I personally think it's a stretch to make it synthetic, but I mean I'm not against it, obviously. But I didn't know if we hadn't really talked about it, I guess. So I didn't know if that part of our presentation so at the high school, we want to take the baseball field and do what?
So if I might here, I'm gonna share my screen, see if I can do this correctly. And this was the slide that we presented at the public meeting. Hopefully everybody can see that.
Mhm.
We did have renovate baseball fields, improve the playing surface, and then there was this comment, synthetic and access to amenities were the additional comments. So, it was brought up there. And I guess the other thing I recently, we kind of last meeting that we had, that we didn't have the one that we didn't have the quorum. had the idea that we go around and get pictures of existing conditions. And I actually did get some pictures of a synthetic softball field at Waterford High School. And I was like, well, I had no idea it was even there, but they have a brand new synthetic softball field there that, I was like, wow. But so we did kind of put this out there. It wasn't, like I say, this is one of the things that we never made the final decision on it. And hopefully, as was being mentioned there, if we can come to an agreement on what it is that we want to recommend, is it just redoing the grass, or is it improving the surface by installing synthetic?
Well, do we follow the coach's recommendation there, who's saying that the synthetic field is what they need and they want? So, right, we're getting the stakeholder feedback, and if we're looking at that field, it feels like we should probably take that recommendation and put some significant weight behind it if that's coming from the folks that'll be using it most.
And Ryan definitely said that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that I think we definitely need to have the renovations to the baseball field as part of the package. And I guess I'm inclined to leave it as improve the playing surface with the possibility of looking at synthetic. And the next step down the road, when we really have to, figure out the real true cost of all these things, that's when that might be a good time to evaluate it. Because I haven't really looked at the field. It might mean that if that field needs $400,000 of work just to make it a decent grass field again, then it probably makes sense to just spend a little bit more money and do synthetic. If it needs $50,000 of filling in some depressions, then it probably doesn't make sense to spend $1 million more on. Well, I shouldn't say it doesn't make sense. In the grand scheme of how much money we're looking at spending, we might choose to spend it differently, I guess. So that's where I think we're on some level too early. I think we'd be open and honest and say, look, we didn't know, and my guess is the whole public doesn't know that the baseball field needs attention. And so A, it needs attention, and B, after a good assessment is done of it, then we might want to consider synthetic because it'll have a longer playing life and be a better suited field.
Can I say a couple things about the baseball field? Number one, we know that there were renovations there, but people need to realize that those renovations were 12 years ago. I mean, so people remember the schooners coming in and spending a lot of money, but this is now New England and the weather, and it's 12 years ago that was done. So it's been a while, and even some of the things they did, need some attention. The dugouts and the press box need some attention, not a maintenance type of attention. And the other thing is that field, amazingly, is probably one of the best draining fields because of its location. The water does not settle in that field. It just runs right off down into Haley Farm and down the hill. So, it is a well-drained field. So I don't believe that the renovations that would need to be done to the field would be horribly expensive to leave it a grass field. And it does drain very well.
Are we also considering other amenities for the baseball field, like restrooms and that sort of thing?
I don't think, I didn't hear anybody mention that specifically for the baseball field, Larry. But I do know that, there was talk of, including support amenities for the new fields and stuff that we're constructing, or we're proposing to construct at the high school. And, whatever restroom facilities are available for those, I would hope are accessible to people on the baseball field as well. I mean, there's a rectangle that's going to be just right adjacent to it in some way. And then the stadium field and the softball field. And, I would hope that there's some type of support amenity and restrooms or whatever that would be appropriate as well.
Yeah, Jerry, the way we listed it was access to amenities. So it wasn't necessarily building a whole new bathroom, but acknowledging that bathrooms need to be there, right? We heard the story of when they had a tournament in the summer and the refs were there all day long and there was not even a porta potty. So we got to solve that, but not necessarily build a bathroom for every single field, but make sure there's access to everyone in the complex.
So I kind of like the way you have that written there in the proposed solutions. It's actually it's kind of where we're at, right? Improve the playing surface, and synthetic is more, almost seems like it's more cost related. Like as you said, is it a $50,000 update or is it a $400,000 update? And then you can make your decision. But I think knowing that we need to do that and putting synthetic as part of what we need to do, possibly depending on other parameters, makes total sense.
I also think like leaving it somewhat open is also great too, because we don't know how long, how many years this might sit before anybody moves on it either. And so this recommendation, what could happen in 1 year, 2 year, 5 years, hopefully not that long, but at that time it could be a different feel or a different thought process. And maybe there's some, huge grant or idea that it could be synthetic versus, turf versus, grass. And I just think it leaves it a little bit open-ended to negotiate a little bit.
Kind of, so speaking of this, how long this will sit around, and I know this is going to the council, but I heard somebody told me that was at a recent Board of Ed meeting that they said the Board of Ed said that they weren't even considering anything for fields until at least 2024, 25. Has anyone else heard that? Okay. Just wondering.
I'm going to say right now that I think part of the presentation has to be that even if no fields project comes along, there's a lot of money that needs to be spent up there just to keep it going in the way that it is. So I think that does need to be part of the presentation in the cost that we now have that would is necessary to, like I just said, the baseball field, it was renovated 12 years ago. It needs some work. The track was done 12 years ago. That surface is going to need to replace in the next couple of years. The football field needs to be recrowned, just the way that it is. So there's a lot of money that needs to be spent, regardless if there's no new fields. So I think that should be part of the presentation.
I think we also need to push in the presentation the fact about equity and access for both, men's and women's, or boys and girls, however you want to say it, sports, right? The fact that we have, issues with ADA compliance, things of that nature. These are all things that create an inequitable situation for folks within the high school, and we need to address that, and that needs to be also front and center. This isn't something that we can continue to kick down the road, and needs to be addressed as soon as feasible, at least in my opinion.
I definitely agree with that. I too think that this presentation can start off with, here's where we're at and here's what needs to be done. A lot of our stuff has not been maintained, and it needs, the restrooms down there are atrocious on the side of the concession stand. And so, yeah, if we did nothing, like, what does that look like? And then start rolling into this. I definitely think, the ABA compliant, the gender equality issues, the, just the state of our fields now, things need work as we speak. And that, I think, needs to be loud and clear.
I've made those notes in the minutes there that we should include those things that were mentioned in the presentation. and I think they probably were, but, you know, highlighting those is a good point.
And if I just might add, if there's any way to get the information on what it costs to bus students to all these different activities, that's a huge cost, because if some of these fields came online, you're going to see a positive revenue over time, and not having to, you know, charter all these buses to take everybody around town. So I'm not sure how much information we can get on that, but that I think is a huge factor and should be considered as well.
Can I also ask another question? Are we putting forth any recommendations with respect to the current turf field and the current softball field built as part of the middle school complex? If there's any pieces there, I'm sorry if my mind is not remembering that, but I'm just looking at the two slides where we flipped through so far, and then we go to Claude Chester. But do we have anything with respect to?
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Because I think. Sorry, because I think we need to also make sure that we've addressed that as well, because the fields exist, but they still need the amenities to get the full, you know, their full benefit, if you will. But
Jerry, it was down there a couple slides. You went by it.
Yeah, I think you went by it, Jerry.
Yeah. Keep going.
Yeah, I think that was.
So that's
right.
the high school, and then the next one down, I think, has it. Yeah, right. Additional lights, restrooms,
Oh, there we
storage,
go.
snowboards. Yeah.
The first one, yeah.
Yep. That
Yep.
being said, we've talked about that really as far as the new turf field goes. I don't know if anybody's played on a new softball field yet. My guess is it's still too early and they haven't let anybody out on it. But do we have, Jim, do you have any feelings on if there's more stuff needed at the softball field too?
I mean, I think it's the same thing as in terms of amenities, right? It's built to minimum specs. So in terms of restrooms, lights, you know,
Okay.
press boxes, etc. I think, you know, they have dugouts, but they're minimal dugouts as well, at least as what I've seen so far. So in terms of getting, again, full use, if we think about it, that could be part of that as well. I mean, again, I think it comes down to how the expectations for usage of that field between high school and middle school sort of sharing. You know, do we want to bring that up to the same level as the field we're talking about for the high school that we want to propose that we build, and then also for Sutton that we're proposing that we build? So that would give us the three from a softball perspective. That would be three sort of fields that would have lights and amenities for full games. And is that where we need to be? So I just posed it as a question to make sure we've addressed it, and how that may play into the existing field and how we renovate some of that or build extra amenities versus the building of additional fields. And if that anything comes back from the council with respect to the cost and the you know, maybe the sticker shock of all of the things that we're asking for as we get into it.
So just if I'm just gonna see if I have consensus here or state what consensus is. I haven't heard any changes to our recommendations to this point. You know, what we presented to the public. I think, you know, if we're all on board with that, I think, Frank, what I would suggest that the committee do is kind of formally vote if we're at that point, and to, you know, kind of establish these as, you know, the recommendation that we want to move forward with is the one that was presented to the public. You know, and then as we mentioned, we'll, you know, add the, you know, the concerns we heard about synthetic surfaces. And, you know, that's if that's where the task force is, I'd like I said, I'd like to have something formally passed that says that that's where we are, just so we can record that in the minutes and go forward to the council with, you know, make it formalized.
I just wanted to also add, I was talking to some other friends in different towns when they revised their fields. And one of the ways that a lot of the times they presented to there was, you know, showing neighboring schools facilities. And I think it would be important, I think, to include, you know, exactly what level our surrounding school fields status and where they're at and what amenities they currently have, especially like in our EC, in our conference, just, I mean, if you just look at even just Ledyard, Norwich, East Lyme, New London, Stonington, really just, and that's, around just the immediate 30-minute parameter, and you can go further and just then say, this is what we have. And I think that, I mean, sends a stronger message, because, I mean, this is what the other kids are using and, to compete on, and this is the amenities that we have. So I'm not sure if that's included. I'm not seeing that in great detail. I mean, it might state that we are behind, but I think sometimes seeing the visual, and the idea of what is around us and what we could have is just an important reminder.
Portia, I did, after the last meeting, I did go around with my phone and I went to Stonington and Waterford, East Lyme, New London. I'm trying to think, several, most of the Ledyard, I went to all of those schools, took pictures of their bleachers, took pictures of their press box, took pictures of their concession stands, took pictures of their stadium fields, took pictures of, all of those things at each one of those schools, and yeah, it's pretty stark when you look at the bleachers at Ledyard High School or Waterford High School compared to the bleachers at, in Groton, or the press box. What does that look like? Or what does the ticket booth look like? I mean, all of those things, it's pretty stark. And certainly, if we add some, here's Groton and here's somebody else, I guess we have some photos that we can use for that, and to kind of let the visual do a little bit of the talking for us as well.
Yeah, I think that's part of what we add into the presentation. I mean, I don't know what they're expecting for a presentation. I thought that, I don't know if they're looking for an hour and a half or they're looking for, 20 minutes. But I totally agree with both of you. I mean, pictures, it's just, like you said, I saw that picture in the paper, was it 6 months ago, of Waterford's girls softball field. And I'm like, that whole field is turf. That is unbelievable. And you look at these girls at Fitch High School that are on two different fields and they're on buses. It makes my head hurt. I'm sorry. But on Jerry's, as Jerry was saying, I think that's part of the presentation that we'll put together, or that will be put together. But I guess, and I totally agree with Jerry, that with the presentation that was given to the general public and to the stakeholders, are we in consensus of kind of on the path that we're on, and what we've kind of looked at and what we've kind of decided on the number of fields and types of fields and where they should go, and the rationale behind all of that amenities, and where they are, the fact that our student athletes can walk to and from more fields than they could before from the high school, so forth and so on. So I guess I agree with Jerry that I think that a consensus of the or a vote on what we've read in the last month or so that we've presented be brought to the committee, and we take a vote on from the committee on what we've presented, and if we think that's the right thing to do. So.
I have a question, if possible.
Go ahead, Bruce.
Thanks. I know I brought this up before, and I think there's differing opinions on it, and I get them both. I get it. I've talked before about putting all the needs or what we're recommending into a priority order in case, and also that has to go along with the cost of it. So I'm wondering if we're not going to include either of those things in the presentation, that we at least have a document ready should the council ask for it. But I think that, my choice would be to have to list our most pressing needs first. I think that financially, it's always difficult. And we talked last meeting about the fact that, if you did it through a CIP as opposed to bonding, and what the differences would be and how much money you're going to get and whatever, that that we somehow address it in the presentation, whether it, like I said, whether it be we have something if you want to see it, or we don't mention it and say we have it if they should ask or something. But I think we'd be remiss not to talk about it and have some kind of consensus on those questions.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce, for that, because we did talk about that at the last, at the meeting that we didn't have. One of the things that was also said there was that, going field by field might be a little problematic, but if we looked at locations, and I think, again, trying to determine what consensus was, I think there was pretty much consensus that the high school is the number one location that we would like to address. And the number two location was Sutton Park, because that kind of rounds out the high school. And then the third was the community fields at Claude Chester. And the rationale behind that was that, when you address the needs of the high school, there is, kind of a little bit of a trickle down effect. I don't think it solves the problem, but there is a trickle down effect where it lightens the load on other fields like at Pequannock Plains or wherever, that those become a little bit more accessible to the community and whatnot. So yeah, if there was a priority, I think from the meeting that didn't happen on, a couple of weeks ago, it was high school, Sutton Park, and Claude Chester. So thank you for bringing that up, Bruce.
So I would propose that maybe we do two votes, or consider. I would say we do one to see if we have a consensus on the amenities as we've presented them, and then do a second one on, ranking those. Do we want to rank them by area or by field, and then go ahead and do that? So we, as a committee, at least we've made those two decisions. So
I think
I guess
that sounds reasonable.
I would say, so I would move that we go forward and present to the council all the fields as we identified them in the presentation to the public, with the addition of the concerns that we heard from the public and the baseball concerns.
I would second that, Chad.
Who was the second?
Jim
This
Southern.
is Jim.
Jim? Okay, thank you.
Discussion? I should say any further discussion? So I'm trying to look to make sure I don't see any hands or. Okay, so our vote would be on, as Chad spoke concerning essentially what we talked to the public about. So I guess we'll do hand vote for those who can, and for those who can't, they can just speak up. All in favor of Chad's proposal, hands up or an aye.
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 Any nays? Are any abstentions? Okay, so
So Frank, if I could just pause for a second there, let me
go right ahead.
I got all this correct then. Motion to approve the recommendations as presented to the public on November 5th with the addition of concerns on synthetic surfaces and baseball fields. Recommendations was made by Chad Frost, seconded by Jim Southers. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. So, and I got the vote was unanimously in favor.
Yes.
And I'm, I guess, ready for maybe Chad, you want to make the next recommendation?
Jerry's multitasking.
So then I would move, I agree. I like the idea of ranking them, and I like the idea of ranking them kind of by area. So I would also move that the highest priority fields are those of the high school because they're in the greatest need. Then our second priority fields would be Sutton Park because it will have good ramifications for the community as well as definitely improving the high school. And then our third priority would be the community fields at Claude Chester that are greatly in need for the rest of the community.
I second.
Any other discussion on that, on how we would,
And I'm sorry, who seconded there?
Larry.
Larry Grundy?
Larry? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess for me, I think we're kind of in the problem that we're in now because no one's really updated anything in over 20 something years. And so it's great to prioritize it. But my fear is that, well, anyway, it's definitely not my first choice of presentation for sure. I think it's much more powerful to look at it as a whole. And obviously if we have to break it down, but I think what happens unfortunately in this town is we break it down and that's what you usually get is, one little thing here and then it takes another pack or group to come back and do one little thing again and then everything sits. So I just think it really needs to be a collaborative effort and really should stick as one whole, but I'll support this too if this is what everybody wants.
Portia, do you feel it's something that we should just have amongst ourselves for now?
Well, nothing's amongst ourselves. I mean, this is a taped meeting. I mean,
no. I mean,
Yeah.
not part of the presentation is my point.
I mean, you guys can do whatever. I mean, I don't want to make any decisions because I'm going to be looking at them after, but I just speaking like not as, as a counselor, just looking at other towns, like some other towns have formed packs and things after towns have rejected things, so, you might have people rise up despite what the council or the town wants. You know what I mean? Like people sometimes kind of form together and say, oh, well, we don't accept this and we're going to challenge it. You know what I mean? And what's the big package? What's the need, and run with it, and try to, get it pushed in on another way. I don't know. I think it can go either way. I think my concern is I would rather see, some collaboration with the Board of Ed and asking for maybe a standing committee to look at fields. So it's part of like a regular item, you know what I mean? So that we don't have to come to this point again as a town, as constituents, as parents, as leaders. I think this should be something that, I don't know. I just wonder if there's a way that we can make this an internal issue that's constantly being looked at and discussed, that's all. But as far as adding it this way, I'll support it, but I'm not sure what the right way is, honestly, is what I'm trying to say. I don't know.
Well, I think Portia, for me, and as I've been around for so long, it seems like, and this has been such a long-standing issue. I tend to agree with that, and here we are, talking about. I'm a Parks and Rec guy, and we're talking about highest needs being at Board of Ed. But I think the point is that these are all needs. But part of what Bruce and others had mentioned at the last meeting was, just that I think it's we have to expect that the question is going to come up, kind of like the synthetic fields. The question is going to come up that people are going to say, all right, well, if we can't do all of these, give us your highest priority. But for me, I think everything I would say to everybody is let's take care of all of these needs. And I have talked to the director, and when we talk about this priority thing, if we go build fields at the high school, and then you come back, a couple of years later, and you talk about I want to do some more at Sutton Park, and then you want to do some more, those are multiple battles that you have to fight, and every time you fight that battle, if you made progress before that, the next battle gets even harder. And, and by the time we get to building community fields, we'll already have fought a couple of battles potentially to get fields at the high school and to solve that need. And, is there going to be, that weariness from people to approve it? So, certainly I do support, addressing all of these needs, but, I'm a staff member and, the one person who doesn't vote on this committee, I suppose. So, but I appreciate your comments there, Portia.
I guess my concern is too, that is, I see what you're saying, and you might get a piece of this through, and then the next energized group comes in, 5, 6, 7 years later, and then the fields that maybe were finally built, if finished, are already needing repair again, like the baseball field 12 years later is needing cosmetic maintenance. We have to maintain. So we can paint a great picture, but what is our contingency and plan to ensure that our town is going to maintain infrastructure as a whole? And if the council and everybody else comes back and says no to any of this, other towns have had people rise up and say, this is what, there's other fundraising avenues. There's other ways to not just say, okay, all right, well, they said no. We have to get enough people really passionate about this to want to make the change or not. And I know it's an unfortunate time of the year because of COVID and everything going on. But with that being said, I mean, the fields is such a huge, long-standing issue way before any of this. And it has to, some type of motion towards repair needs to start happening. And so I'm afraid of the chunking effect of let's fix this piece and then 10 years later, let's fix that. But we got to start somewhere. And I just hope that maybe a standing committee of some sort that comes before the public, that's constantly, as new sports are coming online, that they're thinking like, how are we going to, prepare for these, and what does our field structure, infrastructure look like, especially at the high school. So I don't know.
Isn't this naturally going to have to be a phased plan anyhow? I mean, the sports are not going to stop. So it's just going to naturally be that, once you start renovating a field at the high school, those teams are going to have to go somewhere. So you can't be tearing apart every space. So it's going to naturally become a phased project, just because of the needs of the teams that are existing. So there has to be some kind of a long range plan for this being done. So I think that the 1, 2, 3 situation you talked about could be presented that way, as a natural progression of getting these things done.
I like that.
So, Rich, one of the things I would say about that is, the phasing, you can have the funding and you can say we're going to build these fields, but when you get down to hiring the contractors and deciding what your timeline, within that project, there could be a timeline that rotates the fields through it and does those in that way. And it's a single project. The argument for, you don't need to, even if we're going to start in 2 years, that doesn't mean that we can't approve funding now. And, in a referendum or in a, whatever, a capital project, there are timeframes that we have to spend that money if it's approved. Capital money, I believe, is like 5 years or something like that from the start of the project. And, so it doesn't have to be, the money doesn't have to be approved as the projects are being done. You can approve the money and then phase the project appropriately to maintain that, access to field space that's needed.
That's a good point, Rich. And I agree with both of you that I think the best way to do it is to try to get the money approved as one project and then construct it. Obviously, it gets constructed in 2, 3, 4, 6 phases as constructability kind of dictates. And Portia, maybe the way to kind of offset the concerns about if we rank it is that instead of ranking it as this is our highest priority, our mid priority, and our low priority, we rank it as, from a construction sequence, that this needs to happen construction wise. High school happens first, this happens second, and this happens third, from a construction sequence, not necessarily from a priority or importance, so that it still elevates everything as all necessary, because I think we all agree they are, but it allows us to say we have to do this first and this second and this third. So I tend to like that. Anybody else have thoughts?
No, I totally agree with you. I think that it needs to be pushed as one item. And I think the construction path will, as Jerry said, will lead you in that direction, but you need to start at the high school.
So I'm not the world's leader on or the world Robert's rules of order here, but we do have a motion to establish a ranking, and I think Chad is maybe making a motion or amending his motion or something like that to.
I'm thinking of amending it, and let me know if I can, because I'm not an expert on Robert's rules either. But I would say if it can be amended, that the ranking reflect the
Construction sequencing?
Yeah, construction sequencing, or something along,
Okay, so I think whoever seconded that, and I believe it was Larry, I think you have to agree to that amendment, Larry?
100%.
Okay. So what I have here is motion to establish the construction sequencing as being Fitch High School, followed by Sutton Park, and then by Claude Chester, was made by Chad Frost and seconded by Larry Grundy. So that's where I am right now. And God help me, I hope I got that right.
That sounded pretty good.
Yeah. And I think that's appropriate sequencing, since Claude Chester is really not online. You know what I mean? I think that really paints a timeline picture, and it's really doable. But I do like the fact of funding when it's all lump sum, and if it's bonded or referendum or however it comes, it could be phased, but it's all in one kind of package, because sometimes it is more expensive when you start to piece the projects apart. So I think that's great.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, if there's no other discussion, I can't even try to reiterate what that motion was, but.
Would you like me to read it again?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And then we'll vote.
Motion to establish the construction sequencing as starting with Fitch High School, followed by Sutton Park, and then Claude Chester School, was made by Chad and seconded by Larry Grundy. And then the vote.
Okay, all in favor of that motion, raise your hand or say aye.
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 Are there any nays? Or any abstentions? Okay, so.
Got that, thank you.
The last bit, and I know we kind of rolled it into, and I don't know how our committee can handle this, but the part 2 of the old business was to discuss the means of funding. Do we want to go in as a task force on what we feel that should be? Is that how we want to present this, or?
I think just to clarify what this might mean, I think there are 2 kind of main ways of the town funding this. One would be through a systematic thing in the capital improvement plan. The capital improvement plan is operational funding from the town, and that means it goes to the regular budget process. It goes through the town staff, and then through the town council, and then through the RTM, and it gets approved, you know, in that way. I would say that, you know, the total cost of this being, you know, I don't know if it's $10 million or something, I don't know, but that would be an extremely large CIP project in any given year. I personally haven't seen a CIP project that big in quite some time. At least I can't recall one. And then the other thing is, the other mechanism would be to send it to a referendum where voters decide, do I want to, you know, pay for this? And if that happens, then the funding could be approved, you know, kind of in a lump sum or something like that. And then, as we just talked about, you know, work being done over a period of time. So there are other people on this call that are probably more knowledgeable about both of those processes from the elected standpoint with, Portia and Bruce and Lisa and others who are on, elected boards. Maybe you have other thoughts on that or share some advice, perhaps? I'm going to stop my screen share here, by the way, just so I can see if anybody's waiting to talk.
So, sorry, so you would say that to this point, let's say in the last 20 years, we have proceeded through the quote CIP type process?
If at all,
Or
yes.
that would be the means that got us to where we are today?
I would say that's accurate, yes.
So I think I would recommend that we don't, that's not the, it's probably not the process we want to go down. I just, me being on the outside looking at it, no. And I believe, as we've talked about, that I think we feel like it's it's one big package, if you would. I mean, it is a healthy package, but it's a package that we feel is necessary for the best of our, for the best of the community in Groton.
Do we know what the package ballpark, Chad, is worth? Like, do we know if it went through in the next year, what the estimated cost of everything would be?
I mean, the ballpark I could give right now is that it's about, I would easily guess $1 million a field. You're going to save some money. Softball is going to be less, baseball is going to be more, but somewhere in that ballpark, and then amenities on top of that.
Gotcha.
So I mean, that gets us into the $10 million range real quickly. Obviously, if we really did all of them as once, we would definitely get, some scale, some efficiency of scale, but it's not going to be, 50%, it might be 10%. So, but until, I think going forward, what we need to do is present it to town council. Ideally, if the town council accepts it and wants to proceed forward, they should then, I would think, authorize a department, whether that be Park and Rec or Board of Ed or a combination of both, to then go out and, conduct a real study, hire somebody to design the design developments of each field and each location. And then that's when you get the real cost estimates as to this is really what it's going to cost. And then that would be referendum would be my guess after that, when you really can put numbers and plans and you can see exactly the size of fields and exactly the amenities and all that stuff.
I will share that, I'm not the final decision maker on this for sure, but we actually, through Parks and Recreation, are proposing a capital improvement item for next year in FYE 22 to do exactly what Chad just said, to include money that's going to do all of those things. It's probably a couple $100,000 kind of ballpark to do all those kinds of designing and whatnot, and coming up with those costs and what it's going to cost to design them, what it's going to cost to build them, what it's going to cost to all that kind of stuff, and the amenities. And then I would say, if we do that in 22, I would hope that a referendum could pass, maybe late in 22 or early in 23. And, if that were the way to go.
So do you believe as a committee that's something we should vote on as a committee, so that we're propose what we feel is the best avenue to go after? Is that something we should do as a committee? In general, any comments? What you guys think?
When you say go after, do you mean what means we would recommend to pay to get the money for them, or?
Right. So
I would say
right.
no. I'd leave that up to the council. I think that's my opinion.
Okay.
Also, I mean, some other towns, I know, I remember reading an article back in March as it says, Waterford waits to christen their field as Ledyard's not far behind them. Something like that was the heading. But, some other towns like Board of Eds went for grants, there's a lot of different other avenues that can be processed to, I don't want to put a recommendation that kind of limits us in some aspects, I mean, I don't know that it would, but I think I do agree with Bruce, the council, I mean, first they have to say, do we want to do this? And if they don't, then I don't know, maybe the RTM will fight and say, well, we want to do it, and send it back to the council. Who knows? Anything could happen, but I think it first needs to be defined if we're going to do it. And then I think there's a lot of different ways. I mean, getting our state reps and senator involved, I mean, really, I think is another great way to, I know Ledyard used a lot of that and got some, state funding, and there's different ways to kind of, because I also don't know, I mean, I'm new to this myself, what the process looks like if the town can't tell the Board of Ed, you guys need new fields either, I mean, I think they have to have a buy-in on it as well, right? And at that point, maybe come together and agree to, yes, let's do the high school and let's generate funding and look at grants and things that we can apply for. So I'm not 100% sure on how all that collaboration is going to look like and where that may go. But this is different because it's a group. It's not a elected body here, requesting, wanting fields. It's parents and volunteers and you know what I mean, that are coming together saying, wow, we really need our fields done. So this is a little bit of a different drive.
Portia, can you correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking, and maybe Bruce, as well, might be a good resource, but the source of the funding it doesn't matter if it's, if the funding, like the referendum, the school referendum passed, and then we went out and got whatever money from the state and whatever. So, the project went to referendum, but the money came from, grants or the state and some tax money and whatnot. And in this case, if we approved it as a CIP project and some of the money came from, the state, or some of the money came from a grant or something like that, that's just a part of the CIP. Or if it's a part of the money that might be spent on the referendum, the council and the RTM, it doesn't matter where the money comes from, they still have to vote to approve, either one of those, kind of ways forward. Does that match with what you know?
I would say, yeah, that's correct. Portia, by all means, I haven't been there for a few years, so, but I think that it's, with the bonding, even with the schools, they had to bond on the referendum for the whole amount, even though a good portion of it was coming from the state. That was something that had to be explained in the, in the body of it, because they, it was whatever it was, 180 million, but the taxpayers were only on the hook for 100 million or whatever it was. I think with the CIPs, yeah, I think that when they go to the council and to the RTM for approval, they usually have it broken out by LoCIP money, or, if some money's coming from a different avenue, it's usually noted in there, and the town, they know exactly what they're on the hook for when they're voting for it. So I think the more information and the more money that you have, or find out upfront that you have, the better the chances are that it would get passed, because the responsibility to the taxpayers is less.
So we don't feel as a committee that that's something we need to have a consensus on, if you would. Just let the process work, if you would.
I mean, I guess we're at the beginning stages. I mean, I think if this got shot down, yeah, I mean, some other towns, again, like Dominion donated money, and then a PAC got together and different towns and said, we want our fields. And, so, I mean, this is like the first round, this is just like the first presentation, but it doesn't mean it's the end, nor you don't know where the funding, I mean, if enough need had come out of this, I mean, you never know who you could really get involved, who says, wow, I didn't realize Groton was struggling so much. Like, I don't know, maybe EB, maybe Pfizer. I mean, maybe, I don't know, like there's a lot around us. It's just really never really, I don't know if the funding, as Bruce was stating, if I'm saying it correctly, I'd say let's see where the council goes with it, and the funding would be the next step. But the first is to say we won't get anywhere if they just say I don't think it's the time, and then this is all this work just kind of it's just done until someone picks it back up again.
Okay.
I mean, but I could be wrong. Bruce, what are your thoughts? I don't know.
No, I agree. I agree, and I think that the only other thing that if we had the information by January 12th, or there were grants, or we talked to the state legislators and could say, hey, there's this and this that we can at least look out for and try to show some potential. I think that's helpful, but I wouldn't go into any kind of other kind of how you want the council to fund or do it. It's totally up to them.
Okay. All right.
And
I'm good with
like I said, I think Board of Ed would have Bruce, would Board of Ed have a say in some of the school fields as to, like, yes, we want to repair them, and yes, we're in agreement, and yes, we want to
Yeah.
seek funding. Like, I mean, I don't know how much the town council can tell the Board of Ed, hey, by the way, we want to put a whole new stadium and, this, and this. If they were like, no, we're not interested, then they're their own governing body, really. I mean, the buildings in the town are, we own them and then we turn them over until they're done with them. So there is some collaboration that needs to occur here. That's not just, and that's why I wonder if the presentation should not only be just town council, I think it should be Board of Ed. That was my next thought, but I just wanted to see what you guys felt. I think in other, once again, looking at other towns, I know that it's been more of a collaboration where Board of Ed and town council had to come together and they presented to both bodies. So I'm not sure if you guys want to do two presentations or one for the both of them, but I do think that we should really be looking at both avenues. I don't know how everybody else feels.
So,
Jay, what do you think?
Yeah.
I think you have a point.
yeah,
No, is anybody on here from the Board
Yeah,
of Ed
Jay.
tonight?
Jay is.
Looks like he's on the call here.
Does he think we should present to the Board of Ed?
Jay, you there?
Here he is.
He looks like he's trying to unmute himself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
There it is.
there we go.
Okay.
yeah.
I don't know what happened there. So I certainly wouldn't want this committee, who spent so much time already, making two presentations. But I personally, I don't speak for the board, but I think they would be open to being invited to a joint presentation
Right.
if that's the pleasure of the council. Doing it twice, I think, would be, burdensome.
So I guess the question is then, maybe, I know you guys reached out to the council, I think, to get on also whoever spoke to them, to set this, probably, I would say, that it should be a Board of Ed, town council, collaboration.
So Portia, I believe the putting us on the agenda for the 12th from what I understood from the director was it came from the council kind of down. We haven't heard from them yet. So and we're putting on the agenda for the 12th. It wasn't a request from us going up yet because we hadn't even had this meeting yet. So but yeah, I think I can certainly reach out to the town manager's office, find out, if it was the mayor or another counselor or a group of counselors or somebody that kind of initiated that, and see if there's a way that we can invite the Board of Ed to that January 12th meeting. I can certainly ask that.
Well, our meeting was Tuesday, and it was basically that we were reviewing upcoming agenda items and getting prepared for the budget season. And that was the talk of, athletic fields, and some things were moving, and someone said, well, someone would reach out. So I think it was just like you guys weren't on this was not on the list yet, and time was kind of the question. So, and they hadn't heard
Okay,
from
so,
anybody. So
yeah, maybe the town manager then just, maybe that's town manager action, and he heard it and.
Yep.
and
he said he'd reach out, and we said,
Okay.
okay.
All right, so, yeah, I guess he did. So I will communicate with the town manager then, and I will see if he's open to including the Board of Ed on that presentation, and I'd be surprised if he said anything but yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really driven by, you guys that are running this to say what you want. So,
I mean, the Board of Ed and Town Council have, in the past councils have had joint meetings with Board of Ed. It's been a while. But that could certainly be done. I just think it would be in the best interest to just do one meeting. In the meantime, obviously, I'm going to pass your recommendations on to the individual board members, so you don't have to read read it out loud for the first time, so they'll be aware of it.
Jay, out of curiosity, has the Board of Ed, as this committee's been going through it for, the last bunch of months, almost a year, has the Board of Ed had any discussions? Has any of what we've talked about spurred conversations there? Or are you guys busy enough with COVID and remote learning and all that other stuff to not worry about it?
Yeah, to be honest, I mean, we are flat out with the day-to-day operations of the schools right now. But now that you've come with this recommendation, I want to just present that, to the individual members so they can see it.
Perfect.
The idea of it getting on the agenda before January for us to actually go through piece by piece, I just don't know.
Okay, so Jerry, you're going to reach out to the town manager.
I will. And I was just going to confirm that the task force does not want to make any kind of recommendation on item 6.2 there, discussing any kinds of funding implementation or whatever, that we're just not going to, we're not touching that, and leave that up to the council. And
Okay, and then you're going to reach out to the town manager.
I will.
And see if you can have the Board of Ed invited to the 12th.
Yep.
Okay. So going forward, should we meet again this month? Before, I'm just kind of trying to look at dates just to see kind of where we are, right? So
the regular meeting is on the 17th.
Right.
The regularly scheduled one, but
right.
Is there any business for that meeting, or is that necessary, or do we just?
Right.
Or do we want to kind of go to like January 17th, like to follow up after the meeting and see where we go from there?
Well, I would think that we as a committee should meet at least once more before the 12th.
Okay.
I think we should come up with we need to modify the presentation we currently have to add in the stuff we've all talked about. And then I would say send it around, even if we just email it to everybody, and then hopefully have a quick meeting where we can review it and everybody can say, thumbs up, thumbs down, add this or expand upon this or whatever. And then so that we're all in concurrence with whatever the presentation is going to the town council before the 12th.
Would you like to meet on the 17th to go over that real quick? I don't think it'll be a long meeting. I think.
Yeah, because otherwise we're not going to want to do it the week of Christmas or the week of New Year's, and then it's going to be a rush, right before the 12th. So probably.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. So why don't we meet our regularly scheduled meeting on the 17th? We'll go over the presentation as adding what we talked about today, and then we can disseminate that to everyone. And we may not have to meet again before the 12th. Does that make sense, everybody? Or we think that works? Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good.
All right. So we'll meet again on the 17th at 7 o'clock. And I guess other than that, I thank everybody for being here again tonight. And
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Danny,
that's it. That's a
A second.
on
all
that.
right. Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate it.
Have
Everybody,
a
night.
good one, everybody.
Good night, guys.
Thanks.
we'll see.
Thank you.
We'll see you in a couple
Bye.
weeks. Thanks, everybody. Bye.